Hi, my name's Jon Smart. Welcome to the next Sooner, Safer, Happier podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Joakim Sundén. Hi, Joakim.
Hello, hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Great to have you here. So Joakim was previously one of the first agile coaches at Spotify. Joakim and I have known each other for quite a while. I was lucky enough to go and visit Spotify in New York in kind of the early days of squads, tribes, chapters and guilds. And Joakim was kind of fundamental to the construct of multidisciplinary teams, teams of teams, and the kind of the well-publicized Spotify model. So Joakim, maybe you could introduce yourself, say a bit about your background and then interested to hear more about your time at Spotify.
So, from Sweden, born and raised. My name's actually pronounced Joakim Sundén in Swedish, but I joined Spotify in 2011. I was already working as an agile coach with a background as a developer and architect, and then moved on to agile coaching, and I was employed as one of the first agile coaches when we were around 8 to 10 teams. And I went along for the journey until 2017, so 6.5 years roughly, or more than 200 teams at the end, or squads, as we would end up calling it. So mostly in Stockholm, where the company's headquarters were, or still are. And also I lived in the US and worked in Boston and New York, and also with the San Francisco teams for a while. And now at Crisp, a small boutique consultancy in Sweden, doing more of that, spreading the gospel of great ways of working to other helping other companies and organizations.
So this topic of the Spotify model, quite a lot of people have heard of the so-called Spotify model. And I know you've done conference talks, and some of your colleagues have done conference talks about, the Spotify model is not the Spotify model, and don't just copy the Spotify model. And what I love about your experience is that you were there, you were in the room when the conversation was had around what language do we use and what do we call it. So I am super grateful to have the opportunity to have this chat with you, to kind of dig into the archaeology of the language and how you came to use these terms at Spotify. And when I talk about the language and the terms, I'm talking about squads, tribes, chapters, and guilds. And so this is the move from role-based silos, work passing, to multidisciplinary teams. So, Joakim, if you could say a little bit about the background, and at Spotify, what was the problem that was looking to be addressed, and then how did you come to be using these words?
Yeah, so when it came to language and naming it squads and chapters in particular, that was for very practical reasons early on. We were growing like crazy, and when I met someone at the office, I wasn't sure, are you a guest, a visitor, or is that someone new? And you would ask, so what team are you on? And they would say something like backend 2 or web 3. And that's the team they had been recruited into, the functional team led by their manager. And I was like, no, your Scrum team. And they were like, we don't work with Scrum. And well, the team where you're, that's Bits or something like that. So we said this doesn't cut it. And then we basically just called a meeting. Some agile coaches took the initiative. We were maybe 3 at the time. And just said, we want to come up with some more clear naming. And we also had different names in different departments. So we still had division between technology and operations. And in one it was called team. And in one it was actually called a guild, what we later would be called chapters. So it was confusion all around. So we just wanted to settle for, okay, we need to be more clear on this. And we had some suggestions, and people, some suggested the fire team, work party or party, maybe also from role playing. That's part of the party. And I suggested crew or work crew, but then someone suggested squad, mostly because of hip hop connotations rather than warfare or military. And at the end of the day, we just had a vote, and that's what won.
That's
So
interesting.
that's
I
what's
didn't. I didn't know. I didn't know that. I didn't know that the kind of the logic behind the word squad was from hip hop. That's interesting. So we get large
yeah,
traditional organisations adopting squads. Little do they know that it has a hip hop origin.
yeah,
um,
exactly.
and
It's, the music context, of course, on Spotify.
nice, nice. And then what about some of the origins of the word tribe? You know, what were the? I'm interested. What was the conversation in the room around landing on the word tribe? Where my understanding is a tribe is a collection of squads.
Yeah. So when we knew that we were already seeing some challenges with growth, so we started thinking about how can we actually grow in a way where we still can keep people feeling that like they have access and that they're still part of establishing direction, are empowered and trusted, and have a strong sense also of relatedness. So we wanted these empowered, or as we called it, autonomous teams or autonomous squads at the time. And we were concerned that we would lose that if we start adding hierarchy and so on. So we looked at how can we basically mirroring the concept of autonomy and empowerment on the squad level. Okay, when we grow, we will probably need more people involved in the same mission or sub product, as we sometimes call it. So that it came natural to then organize around these missions or sub products also on the tribe level. And we discussed things like the Dunbar number. I studied social anthropology at the university, and also I think that this was mentioned also in Bas Bodes and Craig Larman's books on scaling agile. Agile that we read as a book club. Basically, that there's a limit to the amount of people that you can have meaningful social relationships to, and before you start dividing into sub tribes, as you would call it. And he studied, of course, nomadic tribes and other tribes, and that's basically the inspiration to the name. We really wanted this relatedness and back to the golden age of feeling, oh, I know who to go to for help. They will know who I am, so they will gladly offer me help. So a strong focus on this sense of relatedness, and that's something I've seen also after Spotify when I've been working as a consultant. There are many other scale frameworks with agile release trains, for example, a popular one that doesn't really convey this feeling of unity and relatedness. And also, when I typically look at these organizations, they don't even view it like that, and they missed out on the opportunity that we invested a lot in, which is building a sense of team in a team of teams or tribal unity. So I think that's what stood out about the name tribe.
I like that. I like the unity angle. That's really interesting, and it's also interesting what you said you studied as well. In terms of, did you say you studied anthropology?
Yeah, social anthropology,
Social anthropology,
Robin
yeah. I think that,
Dunbar.
yeah, I think, and that obviously helps on this topic. That's really interesting. The point around unity, and I guess that's your identity. Your identity is if if you ask someone where they work, they'll say, I work in this squad or I work in this tribe, not,
Yeah,
I'm a software engineer or I'm a data engineer, but rather I work on the desktop front end tribe. I imagine that's what you're striving for with that unity and identity.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's also a big part of Spotify's culture that we really we try to create and nurture as well, that this feeling of we're all in this together. So really, from the start, never ever building silos and saying that oh no, that's not my job, that's not my responsibility, but really cultivating. Okay, that I understand the problem that needs to be solved. How can I contribute? So
Mm.
that's what we were for as well.
Yeah. And on the topic of the language of tribes, when you were in the room talking about what words to use, were there any other words that were being suggested, being floated in the room?
For tribe, I think I don't really remember, but I think that like product area or even something more like sub product was used. We also talked about early on there was an idea that we talked about different layers, so it would be the infrastructure layer and the product layer and the service layer. Pretty quickly we realized that that was not the right lines to divide the organization by, and not a good word to use for that. So it wasn't actually considered, but it was kind of used.
Yeah. Was there something about? I seem to remember hearing something, a story about motorcycle gangs or something. Was there something that
Yeah,
sounded
right.
a bit too much like a motorcycle gang?
Yeah, so when we squad, I mentioned squad, but we also discussed different words for chapters and guilds. And so I remember Hell's Angels being floated as an example of chapters. I think it was
Oh
an
yeah, yeah,
argument against chapters actually,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but it won out in the end. And I think actually we called it guilds, what would later become a chapter, and then we kind of when we grew we inverted it, so the smaller one became a chapter. So it was a chapter of a guild basically. So we would have a global backend guild, and in the tribes we would have a local chapter of that global
Yeah.
backend guild. So,
Yeah. Okay. So there was some conversation around chapter might sound too much like a Hell's Angels chapter, but nevertheless, the word chapter continued.
yeah, I think it's those medieval or craftspersonship connotations around the guild. So
Yeah.
that would be a chapter of that guild where you would
Yeah.
hone your craft, basically.
Makes sense.
A reason why we also settled on these words was that we really wanted to, make it sure that our culture is different. We wanted to broadcast that basically, and we didn't want people to come with preconceived notions of, oh yeah, I know what a team is, I know what a Scrum team is, but we
Mm.
actually consciously chose different words to convey different meaning, and use that to emphasize a shift in culture. We are a special company. It is different. It's not your regular team, and strengthening the identity like that. And then we could also fill these terms that we came up with on our own with our meaning and what we wanted to emphasize. And that's of course the irony then of people later copying those things. That irony wasn't lost on us, and that's what you were talking about when we started saying don't copy the Spotify model. And
And just on that point, I guess that would that be your advice? Would your advice be to not copy the Spotify model?
Yeah, so I've gone back and forth on that over the years. And I think that maybe, we heard some horror stories early on that people had just, oh, we're changing department to tribe and team to squad. And you can now wear jeans on weekdays. It's like transformation done. And yeah, we were concerned that blindly copying and that would reflect badly on what we conveyed with it, and represent a misunderstanding of what we tried to do, but also that you would not get really good results. But the more we started talking to people that used the Spotify model, and especially also later in my consulting, many tell great stories about how this transformations and change is a lot about communication, and these names and the great videos and the imaging around it. It's more approachable and fun and engaging to a lot of engineers and people in the teams than say, I don't want to point out any other framework or big consultancies, but that might not be as easily or well received. So
Yeah.
so as long as you do it with a you know thinking deeply about what are we actually trying to achieve and what do we want to change, and maybe define your own meaning, or project clearly what do we mean by tribe, what do we mean by squads,
Yeah.
then it could work.
Yeah. That resonates with my experience as well, which is start with the why, as you said, be very clear about why you're doing this. What are you trying to achieve? And I think there is a human behavior of the thing for the sake of the thing, agile for the sake of agile, squads and tribes for the sake of squads and tribes, trendy words, trendy terms, let's copy, and then done badly, it's new labels on the same old behavior. So I think it also has to come with a whole cultural element as well, in my experience, which I'm going to come back to. Actually, I'd love to
Yeah.
ask you some questions about the culture at Spotify. So squads, multidisciplinary teams, tribes, team of teams aligned to an area of value is my understanding for a tribe. And in the case of Spotify, that might be kind of desktop client, it might be iOS client, it might be and I don't know the exact terms, but I guess player, different bounded contexts of value.
Sure, we would more express it in terms of well, customer segment or outcome. So user engagement, for instance, or creator tribe, and we would have squads that could either be well around the popular products, such as the Discover Weekly squad, or it could also be more about the functionality when it's more like a platform functionality that you offer internally, but also is an external one like playback. The music would be within the music player tribe, but it could also be growth opportunities, bundling experience, partner integrations, taste onboarding, and things like that. So
Mm. And the reason for doing this is one reason is to optimize for the flow of value. So you've got multidisciplinary teams, like playing rugby, you're moving up and down the pitch together with the ball. You're not playing a relay race, you're not passing the baton. And something you said earlier is we're all in this together. Everybody owns working together to get the good outcome. So once at Spotify, once a tribe, kind of a bounded context of value, be it what you just said in terms of could be partners, it could be Discovery Weekly. Once that had been identified, I'm interested to understand how much ongoing flexibility there then was. So, there'll be impediments to the flow of value, and that might involve changing the shape of that tribe. We might be missing some skill sets. It might not be quite the right boundary. So I'm interested if you could talk through, how you saw them evolve over time.
oh yeah, that's a big topic, but I'll try. And so the way I viewed it is that instead of having, say, a portfolio of projects or programs or initiatives, Spotify basically had a portfolio of tribes. Yeah, we have creator, we have user engagement, we have platform, we have data infrastructure, and so on. And so leadership would focus mainly on, okay, what is the mission of creator? What is that we're trying to achieve? And then we would use metrics or KPIs, as the corporate speak would be, for okay, we want to have bigger reach within artists. Now it's just this percent of artists using the artist app. We want to increase that. We want to increase NPS and so on. And then the squads and the leadership of the tribe, they would come up with ideas on this is some features we want to build. These are some things we want to try, experiments we want to run, and this is what we think we need. And there would be a dialogue with leadership, almost like a venture capitalist model of pitching your ideas. And then we say, oh, great, we'll give you more headcount, and maybe you guys will get a little less headcount. But that doesn't mean that, oh, we've now promised a backlog of stuff that we're going to deliver. No, it's rather, you would expect them to learn and pivot, and then the next quarter or the next half year, that would be the basis of the next conversation. So within that bounded context, they would be free to come up pretty much with any ways they could. They would be responsible for the business results, these metrics and the outcomes, rather than for delivery of specific features or projects or initiatives. So that also means that within the tribe, you can organize in whatever way you want. Do you want to have, a matrix model with chapters and squads and chapter leads, or do you want more traditional one engineering manager for the squad? How do you want to coordinate? What meetings do you want to have? That's whatever suits your context, because it's going to be very different from a growth, marketing, hacking, trying lots of different ideas and experimenting, to hardware partner integrations with people who build speakers or cars. Then you'd need much more predictability and specifications and things like that. So that was also a design goal with the tribe. So this high level of autonomy and independence. But what also happened when we saw changes in the organizational structure, so we relied a lot on what was called self-selection, or has been called self-selection. We didn't have a name for it. A couple of consultants visiting us called it squadification, and later wrote a book where they called it self-selection. So it could be, when I was in Boston, for instance, Alexa came out, the Amazon Echo thing, which threatened to put, now we have a user interface, voice-controlled user interface between us and the listener that we can't control. We need to double down on voice. It makes sense to have that in Boston. So that's more of an external thing, triggering, okay, how should we be organized, assuming that we need to take on this other mission. And we would typically then engage everyone in the tribe. Management leadership would do a little bit of prep. Okay, we think it looks like this, providing context, detailed information. And then the teams and all the team members would be invited to share their views and give feedback. We would start crystallizing, okay, what new missions, what changes to the squads, what competences do we need, what systems needs to shift ownership, what new do we see, what do we need, and basically co-creating the organizational design or the evolution of it. Sometimes more of a revolution. It's like entirely new squad, but more like an evolution or small changes. And then once that's in place, okay, what squad does it make the most sense that you're now working on? And many would probably stay in the same or the new similar squad with the same people they've been working on, but others would move. And it's not, remember, it's not I'll do whatever I want and go to whatever squad I want. No, we're all in this together. It's what's best for Spotify, what makes the most sense. So taking that responsibility of solving the problem rather than what do I want. I don't know if that answered your question or if it's
yeah, it does. Yeah, and that's because what I'm hearing is agility when there is an external market event. You mentioned Amazon Echo, and what I'm also hearing loud and clear is the autonomy. So there's a very clear behavioral value in the company about autonomy, and that's coming through loud and clear. And most organizations, in my experience, don't have that much autonomy, in that here's the pattern top down, we've decided what it's going to look like, and now we're going to roll out this pattern, and you don't really have much of a choice. And what I'm also hearing is alignment. You mentioned missions per tribe. You said senior leaders will say, right, this is the rough direction, now go figure. And also what I heard you say is that people are not, it's not a focus on the output, like what features have you shipped. It's a focus on the outcome, which is amazing, fantastic, awesome, how it should be. So you've got high alignment, which enables high autonomy, because without the high alignment of the shared mission, you can't have high autonomy, because you'll just have Brownian motion, laissez-faire. Some people go right, some people go left. So you've got the high alignment. That's really good. A question on that high alignment and the mission per tribe, or missions per tribe. OKRs, objectives and key results. Were you using that language at the time?
Yeah, so we started using OKRs, I think, in 2009. So that was even before I joined. And so when I joined, I had my individual OKRs as that I agreed on with my manager, the tribe lead, and we had on all levels. But individuals who were part of squads, they didn't have objectives and key results. They only had one for the squad. So emphasizing that it's a team effort, but not individual ones. And but later we replaced them with another thing for a couple of years, but then OKRs came back, and now I mean, I haven't been at Spotify for a while, but I regularly talk to a lot of people there, and it's OKRs more than ever. So that's absolutely widely being used, but no more now, more on a tribe level. That's how it
Hmm.
was reintroduced.
Hmm.
But now also squads have started using it, because once it's on the tribe level, it's basically the squads contributing to
Yeah.
creating the OKRs at the tribe level. So then it becomes natural to also, you know,
Yeah.
for some it would suffice to be guided by the tribe's OKRs, and in some instances you would probably come up with squad specific OKRs.
Yeah. Awesome. Amazing. I really do think that is a success pattern when you've got OKRs, multidisciplinary teams, you've got high alignment, you can have high autonomy. In terms of the autonomy enabling different ways of working within the tribes, and you gave some examples of, one might be a bit more hardware focused, one might be a bit less hardware focused. So there wasn't prescription about how you organized or worked within the tribes. Was there a flip side to that flexibility? Was there a downside to that? So if you did want to have any movement between squads, between tribes, did it mean that you've got to learn a different way of working, or was there any kind of uh, like flip side to that?
Uh, not not the one you're suggesting, at least, because I think that's always been, in my experience, overvalued. That, oh, we need to have the same practices, and then it will be easier for people to move. Well, I would say, for one, we don't want people to move unnecessarily. So more keep stable teams. But also, if it's a problem that the way of working is different in the other team than what you're used with, it's, you probably rely too much on heavyweight processes rather than, collaborating to get the work done. So I didn't see that that was a big problem. Of course, the problem becomes higher up in the organization when you try to create an overview, understand what's going on. But that's also a typical way that Spotify would solve problems like that. Say that's when we reintroduce the OKRs. They say we're all using different terminology. Some say we have these bets on the tribe, and some we're using OKRs maybe. That we need one consistent layer at least on that abstraction to figure out what's going on and to more easily coordinate. So that's when leadership decided everyone has to use OKRs, and this is how we interpret OKRs. There was a collaborative co-creation work defining that. But then, how do you actually establish your OKRs? How do you work with them? How do you follow up internally? We don't care. That's, what's going on inside of your box. We don't need to know. Another drawback, though, was that it sometimes, to me, felt like we were not giving enough guidance. And basically, you come up with it, and then people would reinvent the wheel from scratch. We wouldn't learn in a structured way, not learn from what others were doing. Sometimes we would look, oh, you already figured out a good process for establishing OKRs. Let me copy that. Awesome. And, oh, I just have to make these tweaks and these changes. But no structured sharing and learning. It happened, but it could have happened in a more structured way.
In your time there, on that point, when you were there, was there a central PMO, project management office, or a VRO, value realization office, to kind of help pull all
No,
the OKRs together and get the overall view?
no. It's we actually were afraid of project managers for quite a long time, and I think we went a little bit too far on that scale and threw the baby out with the bathwater. But remember, when we introduced tribes, this was 2012. There weren't a lot of people. If we try to hire a senior, experienced, great project manager to a company like Spotify in 2012, that would have great experience of an agile way of running that. No, it was very hard to find. So great project managers were, attention to detail, having a strong idea on how things should be done, and we would want more of a facilitating capability and so on. So we didn't have that. But once our culture became stronger, and as we grew, and it was easier to get people with this experience, and we had also grown people internally, Spotify actually, after I left, built up something that they called a project management office. But I used to say that it's not your mom and dad's PMO. It's very different. It's more making sure that the people who are involved in what we would call a company bet, a bigger initiative that's cross-functional, that giving them a platform to meet, making sure that everyone understands what they need to do by talking to each other. So creating platforms, communication channels, clarity, context. While I would say a traditional PMO in my mind is more like I am the one running around getting the information, being the spider in the net. Everything has to go through me. I'm responsible for budgets, and I call the decision and make the shots. And the people who are actually depending on each other and need to collaborate, they might not even know of each other. So that's not helping in building this sense of we're all in this together. Okay, we need to figure out together how it needs to be done.
I like that. I like that, turning it on its head, and rather than pulling the information into one point, pulling the people together to share the information together. And you mentioned company bets and cross-functional. So would I be right in thinking that that's in the context of a company bet is where we want to do a piece of work which is going to touch multiple tribes? Is that the context?
Yeah, or it could even be other functions without R&D, like marketing or legal or customer support and so on. But I would say that most of the, at least during my years and what I know of after, it would be mainly this portfolio model of investing in different tribes or objectives and then increasing or decreasing capacity, mostly in terms of headcount and changing the more or less challenging key results or objective and key results or metrics. That would be steering the day-to-day, and that would be taken care of within the tribes. But then, because we knew we have good track record of executing, can we do it within one squad? Excellent. Could we at least keep it in one tribe? Yeah, pretty awesome. But then, as soon as more are involved, and it's a little bit here and a little bit there, and it's really important, not so good. So that's why we introduced company bets to cover at least. So these are the 10 most important things, stack ranked. So you knew that if someone on company bet 1 says we need your help, and you're working a lot with company bet number 3, it's still a strong signal that we should probably see if we can help. But it's still you're responsible to make that decision. You have to weigh the pros and cons and so with autonomy and empowerment, of course, the flip side is you have to take responsibility, and you can't say, well, decide which one. These both are prioritized. Which one should I do? Well, you need to figure out. Talk to people, understand the pros and cons, and so on.
Yeah, I like the fact
And I
that
think that's the problem in other organizations when we have 14 must wins. So there's everything. Everyone can connect what they're doing to one of these must wins. And then when you say, I need your help, okay, but I'm also working on the most important. So there's no signaling strength in what's supposed to be a strategy.
Yeah, I like the fact that they are the 10 most important things stacked ranked. That's very clear. I also like the fact that it's only 10, as opposed to the top 237 priorities.
Well, as the story goes, then the first time we put this up and said, okay, what are these? We defined company bets and what are the ones going on now? And people identified on the executive level 38 company bets. And I said, no, that's not going to cut it. Let's say 30. And I go, what? No, never. We can't get it done. These are the 38. No, 30. And once they did that, sweaty conversations. And okay, now 20. I was like, what? And then 10. So that was very difficult conversations, and took quite some time for executives and senior leaders to actually, accept this and start following suit. But eventually it happened. And then as the organization grew with adding thousands and thousands of people, when I visited New York office a few years, it was right before the pandemic, they had probably doubled in size since I was there, and we had 10 company bets. I said, do you still have 10 company bets? Actually, we only have 4 or 5, was the answer, while the organization had grown a lot. So,
wow, that's great. That's really good. So guilds and chapters. So we've spoken a bit about squads, we've spoken a bit about tribes. I want to interested to touch on guilds and chapters. So can you describe a little bit about what is a guild, what is a chapter, and also if there was any history there around the terminology? You've mentioned some of it already. So, but a bit of like,
Yeah.
what are they, and a bit of the background.
Yeah. So when we had we had clearly the squad. Then that's where you do your work. The Scrum team or Kanban team or whatever way you're working, you're using the team that you're working with together daily to deliver value. And then you're also always, every engineer or every individual contributor in R&D will also be part of a chapter. And that's a group with people from the same functional group as you. So it could be, in the early days was backend, QA, web, mobile. As we grew mobile, we added iOS and Android maybe, and the backend became machine learning and data and so on. And the chapter was within the tribe, but it was also 10 person or smaller, so 4 to 10 people typically in that chapter. And that meant that if you have like 20, 25 backend developers in a tribe, you would have 2 or 3 chapters. So we wanted to cap it at a number. And that was in part driven by, we wanted the chapter to be high quality conversations, active. So you can't have a big group of people, but then you want to be able to have this active conversation about your practice, your craft. What does technical excellence look like within our field? What makes a great Java or backend developer? Really work on your craftsmanship and personal skills. And the other reason why we wanted it small was because one of the chapter members was the chapter lead, basically the manager for the others. So someone who really knew that craft well and could mentor and help and develop the people in their chapter. And the idea was that we would work 50% time as a manager and 50% time as an individual contributor on the squad that they were part of. But some of because it's a matrix model, you would have some of your co-workers on other squads, or most of them actually. And then when we introduced the tribes and had these chapters, we were concerned that, well, wait a minute, we still want to transfer knowledge and keep it together and have a community of interest, if you will, on a global scale at Spotify. So that's when we just said, okay, but all the backend chapters are then the backend guild. All the web chapters are the web guild, and so on. So easy. What do they do? We don't know. We'll see. They will probably meet. They'll have an email group and a Slack channel. They figure it out. So and the first guild meeting to take place was the web developer chapter leads who had agreed to kick off the guild, and we were also clear on the guild coordinators that we started it up with. They should only bootstrap the guild. It should feel like we own the guild together, and everyone should take an initiative to. Shouldn't we meet again, or shouldn't we do something? So you weren't relying on someone else having the passion or the focus, but everyone should own it and care about it. But they said that we're bringing all the web developers in from the US to Sweden to have a crayfish party and socialize, but we probably should do something more than that. Agile coaches, can you help us? And I've been running, and some of us have been participating in a popular Swedish conference called Agile Sweden. We have lightning talks in the beginning of the day, time boxed at 10 minutes, a bell sounds and people applaud, you have to get off. And that's called unconference because it means that a lot of the participants are actually also speakers, because with 10-minute talks, you need a lot of them. And it's easy. And then in the afternoon, we would have open space. So the lightning talks would act as seeds to these conversations. So basically just a blank space of time slots and rooms. Okay, I want to talk about this thing that I heard a lightning talk about, or I did a lightning talk about, or it could be any topic. And then people would just go together. So, and that became the de facto model then, or standard for how guilds were doing unconferences once or twice a year.
Mm.
So that's basically.
How often would the guilds meet? How often would they get together, people in the guilds? And was it always in person or was it sometimes virtual?
It was once or twice a year in person when I was at Spotify. Spotify was very keen on co-location and would fly people over to so that all web developers in the world could meet in one place and so on. That of course has changed since. So now it's hybrid or virtual or sometimes I know they still co-located, but it would be once or twice a year. It came to the point at some point in time it was like we had a problem or the challenge when the organization grew that teams felt that they were almost never intact. There was always some guild or workshop or thing. So we actually started having off-site weeks. So 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in the fall. So you had to coordinate. So that was the time when everyone would do strategy days, product days, tribe offsites, guild offsites. Hack week would be on such a week, for instance, so to make it easier to coordinate. But chapters, on the other hand, that group would meet weekly, maybe once or twice, do a knowledge sharing, maybe watch a video, talk about what does good Java code look like, or this is a cool new testing framework. Should we consolidate and use the same, or is there no point? And that's also an important point because the chapter wouldn't have a backlog of sorts. They wouldn't have any time to spend on that. So if you identify that we should do some work together in the back end, or we need to change this thing, then you would have to go back to your squad and make the case that I need to spend time on doing this.
Yeah, interesting. And reporting lines. So you said that for the chapters, there's a chapter lead, and the chapter lead is mentoring and developing people within that chapter. So that might be the example you gave is web developers. It could be QA. It could be mobile. It could be machine learning. It could be data. So reporting lines. Can you talk a little bit about who reported to who and what that really meant? Because, you know, in the past, traditional ways of working, who you reported to was also where the work came from, as in, you know, you go back previous industrial revolutions, that, you know, it was literally where your orders came from the person you reported to, and here's your work order kind of thing. So yeah, could you talk a bit about kind of reporting lines, what it really meant to be the reporting line, the change in what it means to be a reporting line, and maybe talk a bit about incentivization as well, about, you know, how were people incentivized?
So the chapter lead, as I said, was a 50% individual contributor and 50% manager. And it was a matrix model. And the ideas that drove that was that, well, one, you should really be able to develop your people and be a mentor to them. That's your number one job, is to grow people. And we emphasized that a lot, and we gave the chapter leads lots of training and support in becoming better coaches, teaching them professional coaching more or less, how to set up one-on-ones using the grow model and so on. And we wanted everyone to have at least a weekly meeting with the people reporting to you, focused on their development mainly, and that they're happy and thrive at Spotify. So a lot of time went into that. And very quickly, chapter leads found that I don't have time to both be an individual contributor and a manager. So that's one of the biggest misunderstandings of how Spotify uses chapter leads, because that's in the white paper, it's a 50%. And I see some organizations like, oh, excellent, then we can save some money if the managers are also working. But that never really worked for us. So that changed quickly. And when I was at Spotify and after it was, I don't know of any chapter lead that I worked with that was a contributor. No one was forbidding them from it, but you know, it was very hard to do that. So some went back to be developers, other kept, you know, oh, I think there's a good value, and this is what I want to do. And that also meant that we started hiring more. When we started hiring more people, gradually we saw a shift on more emphasis on the soft, I don't want to call it soft skills, the people skills of coaching and the helping people on their journey and so on. And I know that the other thing we optimized for was that when you have this matrix model, it's clear that it's not like what you said, that the manager is the one assigning your work, or they don't have a bigger say in what we should be doing or how than anyone else. Because, you know, you would probably have your manager in another team as a contributor or chapter lead, and you could have two chapter leaders. You all have different managers, so why would you listen to anyone in particular? And we also said that they're not responsible for delivery at all, but just growing skilled people. So we really wanted to avoid micromanagement, have the team self-organized, and so on. And I think everything, all of this succeeded eventually, and we had a very strong focus on people development. And then the pendulum had swung kind of too far towards that, because we had a lot of people who were more coaching than actually actively mentoring, and we had a little bit lost touch with, you know, you understand what's going on in the team so that you can be close and give active feedback, because you have reports in lots of different things and you don't really know what are they doing. And nowadays, Spotify has switched it out so that they call it the engineering managers even, and everyone in your team report to you, regardless of whether you're back-end or anything like that. And some people have suggested, when I talk about this around courses, or well, not even Spotify is using the Spotify model, as if, you know, what Spotify is doing now must be the latest and greatest. So if we only copy that, we don't have to skip through all the steps of. But no, of course, it's, you know, we were optimizing for one thing at one particular time point in time, and then we saw other challenges, and now we're optimizing for that. And that's so often when I describe the roles in use, it's like, what are you optimizing for? What problem are you trying to solve? And I think this is why chapter leads have become so popular, and why some big consultancies emphasize that, because in a transformation, you know, if you've outsourced a lot of your people and now you want to build a strong engineering or tech culture again, it really makes sense to have someone who is a craftsperson themselves, to kind of build this culture and so on. But then the chapter leads in turn were reporting to the technology tribe lead. All the product owners, or product managers, as we would end up calling them, the product manager for the team, the squad, they would report to the product tribe lead. And then we would have maybe designers and user researchers reporting to the design tribe lead. So we had this trio of product, design, and tech. And now there's also insight tribe lead, actually. And they would report to the CPO or the CTO or the director of design. And then as we grew, we would add more layers. But that's a important thing, that because everyone, you know, SAFe and other frameworks sometimes we'll talk about, oh, it's a virtual organization. You don't have to change your hierarchy and structure and so on. Well, it's good because it offers you a transformation path that's a little bit easier to get started with. But I think that if you're not in the end trying to change reporting lines, that it will be much harder. Because we really had this. We're all in this together. Everyone is reporting to the same leadership and leadership team. We're all, if we want to say like, we want to sacrifice a front-end developer to instead have a machine learning specialist or an agile coach, or you know, we can make those choices. We own it. We control it. We run it, and that did wonders for the we're all in this together relatedness culture.
I like it. There's something I'm going to call out in what I heard you say, which is something that I see as a repeating pattern for success. You said that there was a trio: product, design, and tech was the trio that you said, and you said that the you know, from the product part of that trio, the product managers reported to the product manager in a squad, would report to the product manager in the tribe, would report to the product manager, keep going up, whatever, the tribe of tribes, and then ultimately the tech lead reports to the CTO. I guess the product lead ultimately, I guess, reports to the chief product owner of the company, who might be the CEO, depending on the company and the product. So that's a pattern for success that I have seen. So it's good to hear you say that. That kind of confirms my own observations. And then that trio, and you said product design and tech, that trio, do they need to operate as peers? And would you say that there needs to be a healthy amount of tension between them so that you can have a challenging conversation about, hang on a minute, we need to stop building new features, we need to slow down on the features, and we need to do some tech debt remediation, for example? Do you see that they need to be peers rather than there being like a power gap where the product manager is
Yeah,
like, here's like, I'm going to dictate what we do? Is that something you've observed?
yeah. So that was we talked often about team at all levels of the organization, and we wanted this tribe lead trio to work as a team and be constantly aligned on what we should be doing and so on. That's actually we when that was communicated from leadership, we took inspiration from the work that we were doing together, John, in the Steve Denning Learning Consortium. When we visited Riot Games, they had this phrase: individual accountability, collective responsibility, that I picked up and wrote about in my report. Where so the CTO and CPO was like, and the director of design were like, this is spot on. This is exactly describing it. This is what we've been talking about, but we didn't have it put in such a great way. So while the technology tribe lead was individually accountable for tech health and so on, and the product for mission and outcomes and so on, it was clear that it's a collective responsibility. Individual accountability means you're making sure that it happens, but if you're the person making the decisions, you're doing it wrong, because we're collectively responsible for making sure that it happens. And that was key. And they all even did what we call a switcheroo. So they said that the product tribe lead is now individual accountable for organizational health and ways of working, which has typically been the tech tribe lead. And that didn't stop the tech tribe lead from working as much on these issues as they used to, but it meant that the product tribe lead now also needed to take an interest, because they would be asked by their CPO, how's way of working, organizational health, and so going. They couldn't, as usual, defer. Oh, talk to the tech tribe lead. They've got that covered. No, you have to know. You have to be on top of things. So that meant that the collective responsibility and ownership increased. And that's also a thing that I see with clients that I work with. It's almost like we do these assessments and go in and help companies with transformations or change journeys. And it's like I can almost write it already before going into the assessment, that aligning the leadership team, because that seems to be something that's underinvested in, and people are really missing out on. Just getting this leadership together and alignment, and feeling this, we're all in this together. We have a shared ownership of the success of this tribe or this company or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it goes back to 5 Dysfunctions of Team by Patrick Lencioni and so on. So we've known this for decades. At Spotify, we've worked actively on it. Other companies, not so much, it seems.
Yeah. So I really like the culture that's coming across here around autonomy, empowerment, experimentation, optimizing. The fact that even at a relatively early stage, there were coaches in the organization coaching on the system of work and the culture, so how people work together. I like what you said about, what do you want to optimize for? I like that question. It's like we can optimize for anything we choose to optimize for, but actually, what, we're going to choose to optimize for something. Lots of companies don't choose to consciously optimize for anything and end up accidentally optimizing for some things. So the culture at Spotify, the values. If you could maybe just say a little bit about that, and what were the values that were being driven from Daniel, the founder? What was the principles, and what were the leadership behaviors that were incentivized in the company?
Yeah, and I think that Daniel and the other founder Martin, already from the get-go, they had this idea on, let's hire the best engineers and basically let them loose on this problem that we need to solve. So there was an idea of empowered engineers already from the start. They are the ones that need to innovate. they couldn't do it themselves. They had an idea of a music player, but how do we get it to be as fast and play instantly and so on? We don't know. They need to figure it out. And that was, they really had success with that and tried to keep that culture as we grew. And pretty early on, recruited a CTO that had the same view and had successfully taken a startup to a bigger company using lean agile principles and way of working. And he really came into the organization. He called himself the first agile coach at Spotify, because that was basically what he did this first year. He started shaping up the organization. He hired us agile coaches. He worked a lot with us. So that's why we were involved in the early stages of squads and chapters and tribes. Once we got that going, he was like, okay, great. Now we have this organization. Now we're going to focus on the architecture and introduce microservices, basically. So I think that great support and that they understood this and they believed in it and had seen it being successful. And also that the founders were serial entrepreneurs who had seen it gone the other way as well. How bureaucracy and so on had just slowed everything down to a halt. So we had this idea of empower and trust. The CTO, Oscar Ståhl, by the way, he was very influenced by Dan Pink's drive, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That would really motivates us. So already from the start, when we started building tribes and squads, we had this concept of autonomous squad. So the picture he used was like, it should be like a mini startup. And everything else in the organization should be designed to support that squad. While in other organization, it feels like we're here to serve our masters, basically. We had turned the pyramids upside down, that every leader, everything, every policy, every process, it should be focused on helping this one. And then, so give them problems to solve and the space to solve it, and great things will happen. And if you look at the products coming out of Spotify, like Discover Weekly, Spotify Connect, and every great thing typically came out of a hack week or a team or an individual engineer coming up with an idea and then being persistent in executing it, even when getting negative feedback from management. Oh, it's too hard, too difficult. We just go on, build it in hack week, and then I go, wow, this is really cool. We should do it. So that's been reinforced, and you can see if you go on LinkedIn or Facebook and watch what Daniel Ek, the founder and still the CEO, is saying. He's constantly praising Hack Week and empowered engineers. That's like what he communicates basically to the world. So that was important, and really trusting people to make these choices, and to that being safe to fail. So we talked a lot about psychological safety before that became a term. We expressed it in other ways, and we both on the culture side clearly emphasizing, and we even recorded videos on Daniel and others, leaders and the individual contributors, describing this is a mistake I made, a huge mistake. This is what I learned. This is how I try to fix it. To show that everyone is making mistakes. We showed it in onboarding and town halls. People started setting up these fail walls where they wrote blog posts about it, but also at the same time working to have ways of working that makes it low cost to fail. So if we can constantly put out small things and do small experiments with small customers, then we can fail early, fail often, and fail to a very cheap price. It's not about we make this big, enormous project and we don't care if it fails. That would have never worked. And building a technology, microservices, gradual rollout, continuous deployment. So to both the culture and the way of working and the technology needs to be aligned on making it safe to fail. And then the last piece, just shortly, we already talked about it. I would say we called it, started talking more and more the bigger we grew, and not just about autonomy, but aligned autonomy. We're all in this together. Shouldn't sub-optimize. Don't look at what you can do for your team, but how can your team contribute to the overall all of Spotify. So this responsibility that comes with autonomy. Who do I need to collaborate with? Is someone else working on this? Is this conflicting with something else? Is this going against our regulations? Is it not working with label licensing? You have to figure out. You have to ask those questions. No one will serve them to you on a plate.
Yeah. And and then my understanding is it then evolves over time as you continue to optimize for the outcomes you're going after. So it's not a fire and forget. It's a here's what we're doing now, and then within all those values you said, my understanding is it continues to evolve.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we often revisited our values, and as I said, we talked a lot about autonomy. That was hard to get to. We were afraid of micromanagement and all of that thing. But when our culture was very strong in that, and we had a lot of autonomy, we saw the other result was that we don't understand what's going on. People were running in all sorts of directions, and a common reaction would then be, okay, we need to introduce more control. But to us, it was no. We need to introduce. How can we introduce more clarity, more guidance, more context, more information, more support, so that we don't stifle this autonomy and creativity, but rather, direct it in a way where it becomes very useful to the same problem. And you asked how we incentivize this, and it's. I would say that one thing is that we had technology career steps. So it's been blogged about, so you can have a look at it on the Spotify blog. But it's basically saying that mastery is one of 5 areas. That's the basis of your career advancement and thus salary. The others are that you continue that you value team success over individual success, that you work on continuous improvement, that you care about business impact, and so on. So you actually had to be helping others, training others, having a huge impact, collaborating, and to be able to advance at this point. So really put your money where your mouth is.
I love that. So the incentive is to help the team, help the organization, have business impact. So you're incentivized to do the right thing. The individual accountability, collective responsibility quote that you picked, that we both heard at Riot Games. Fantastic. There are a lot of lessons in there that a lot of organizations can benefit from. There are a lot of organizations who are, I perceive, going about this in a bit more of a top-down type manner without so much collective input and shaping aligned to outcomes, which is human nature to try to copy something. So what I'm picking up here is it's all about the values, it's all about the culture. Be clear about what you want to optimize for, and then pursue evolutionary or maybe sometimes revolutionary improvements. And something I heard you say earlier is kind of make it your own as well. Don't just copy, make it your own. And that might mean your own language as well.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, it's always been about, applying the Spotify model on change or a product mindset or a product model or agile way, if you want it to be really clear. What's the product vision? What's the change vision? Use that context and then do product discovery or change discovery, and not just work in big bang projects, but rather incrementally, iteratively, small chunks, engage teams. We expect to introduce a way of working with autonomous, empowered teams guided by a vision and context. Then we should, of course, do that in the same way. Have a vision for what the change should be about, engage them, be stubborn on this vision, but as Jeff Bezos writes, stubborn on vision but flexible on details. If the teams have a better idea, awesome, present it. If not, here's a way you could do it that we believe will reach the vision. But as soon as you see it's not helping, you can come up with something else. And actually be using your acronym there, VOICE. I think that's spot on and exactly describes this. Clear on vision and principles and the outcomes, and then lead with intent or context, as I would say, coach and support and run experiments. That's really what it's successful change is all about.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Joakim. Really appreciate your time. Lots of learnings there, which hopefully other organizations can benefit from. And great to capture this ways of working moment in time, like kind of organizational archaeology. It's great that you were in the room at the time the conversations are being had and you've been part of that journey. So very grateful for you sharing your time, sharing your learnings and your thoughts and your experience. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure.